A new twist in the BBC presenter scandal as the alleged victim calls the claims rubbish.
Hello there, 7 o'clock is the time. Very nice to have you on board. Eamon and Ellie here. Tuesday, the 11th of July, breakfast on GB News.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. The mother of the young person at the heart of the BBC presenter scandal says they stand by their claims after a lawyer representing the youth said nothing inappropriate or unlawful took place. Our home editor, Mark White, will bring us the latest.
Where the BBC's Director General is preparing to launch the corporation's annual report. That press conference, of course, is normally dominated by presenters' salaries, but on this occasion there will be one topic and one topic only that those journalists want to hear about.
Rishi Sunak will tell NATO leaders in Lithuania today to increase spending to deter Russian tyranny as he urges them to meet their defence targets.
The government has been forced to U-turn on key parts of the illegal migration bill after it suffered 20 defeats in the House of Lords. The changes include limits on detention periods for children and pregnant women.
And how long are the July downpours set to continue? Have you been affected by downpours?
Yeah, when I got off the plane last night, chucking it down.
Straight away?
Yeah.
Goodness.
What a welcome back.
Yeah, there you go. Latest weather update coming your way shortly.
There's been quite a bit of heavy rain overnight and there'll be more downpours through the day today. Join me later for a full GB News weather forecast.
Well, our top story on this Tuesday.
My experience is that when these matters affect people who are highly paid presenters, high-profile individuals, household names, staff would like that person to be treated the way that everyone else is treated. Okay. And if there's any sense that that person was given special treatment when the complaints were raised back in May, and that a producer would be treated differently and would, let's say, be brought in and would be suspended immediately. If there's a sense of differential of treatment, staff will be absolutely furious about that.
OK, we were just a bit early there with an interview with a man called Danny Shaw, who is a commentator on political matters, who had worked for the BBC for 30 years or so.
And giving us a sense of how it's going down from inside the corporation, because, of course, a lawyer representing that young person at the heart of the BBC presenter scandal has said claims that they were paid tens of thousands of pounds for explicit pictures was rubbish.
In response, the parents say they stand by the claims. They accuse the BBC of ignoring testimony given to them back in May.
Well, Mark White is at Broadcasting House for us now. Good morning to you, Mark. This has got a lot more complicated, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. I mean, we're into the fifth day of publication of articles relating to this story in the Sun newspaper. And yes, there's more revelations coming out, but in terms of the central allegation and how true or otherwise that might be, we don't seem to be much further forward. Indeed, it took quite a significant turn last night when these lawyers for the young man at the centre of these allegations said, actually, from their point of view, this story was wrong. Rubbish, they called it, and said that they had contacted, the young man had contacted the Sun newspaper prior to this report going to press to say as much to them. So there are some questions for the Sun newspaper to answer as well in terms of whether they did receive information from this young man to suggest the story was not true, and what they did in response to that, because there seems to be no mention of that in the article that hit the papers on Friday morning.
Mark, thank you very much indeed. Let's now bring in Andy Barr. Andy is a crisis PR expert. And Andy, we're seeing from the stories in the papers today that the fight back has begun because a lawyer has been employed to represent the young person.
Good morning. Yes, the BBC have come out firing. In crisis comms, it's all about trying to get on the front foot. And in this case, the rhetoric in some of the BBC articles is a lot stronger this morning. They're pointing out factual errors and discrepancies in the reports in The Sun about who said what and when. So we've seen a total shift in approach by the BBC right now.
And it's going to be a very interesting day, isn't it? I mean, the timing is pretty incredible in that sense. It's the release of the BBC's annual report today, so we are going to see the Director General take questions from the press. And usually, as Mark White, our correspondent, was just saying, that would usually be about presenters' salaries. That's usually what this day would entail. But of course, today it's going to be on one topic only. It's going to be very, very challenging, isn't it, for Tim Davie today?
Oh, very much so. It's going to be a media disaster for the BBC. You know, they're going to dream of those awkward questions about Gary Lineker when really they're talking about, a huge scandal that threatens to rock the actual fabric of the organisation. So yeah, what's historically been a troubled day for them in terms of presenter salaries is actually going to now become a much harder set of questions and a much more difficult one because there's so many legal connotations to what they do and don't say.
You know, Andy has a good point about what you do or don't say. You are a crisis PR expert. Who's facing the biggest crisis, the BBC or the presenter involved here? Because you see, a lot of people would say, whatever the faults of the BBC are, they didn't have this relationship, however appropriate or inappropriate it is. And when they find out who the presenter is, it will be quite shocking, I think, in terms of image as to the relationship that there has been, the acquaintance that there has been here. So who is facing the bigger crisis, the presenter or the BBC?
I think I'd add three people in there. I think you've got The Sun as well, because obviously they've took a huge risk. They've run this story in good faith. Obviously, they will have sense-checked it. Now, obviously, the BBC is at huge risk, but you never know what your employees get up to. And as humans, we're strange folk and we do strange things. So the BBC can probably have a bit of wiggle room, as we say in crisis comms, whereas the presenter is on a very tricky uphill battle.
You know, what about other presenters and reacting to this? I mean, I haven't worked out really if it's a good idea to deny involvement in this or to say nothing and let sort of due process take its course. What would your advice be to male presenters that think or have been accused or think that they may be accused in this whole game?
Well, it's very difficult when the police are involved. We need to understand exactly what they're thinking and whether they're going to potentially go to the CPS with this. If they do, then obviously they can't really publicly say anything. If they're falsely accused, which we saw obviously over the weekend, it's hugely difficult because obviously social media can be a bit of a cesspool, and you need to be careful in how you address the issue so as not to escalate it more. But I think they did the right thing in coming out and saying, look, it's not us. But as you'd always say in crisis comms, everyone thinks there's a magic bullet. The magic bullet is just telling the truth.
So in crisis comms, what would your advice be to the BBC now, especially on a day like today? Because there are going to be questions of what they knew and when. The parents are claiming they had an hours-long discussion with the BBC back in May.
Well, I think that's the issue. That there's two problems here. Historically, they've not pressed the panic button quick enough. They've not got their legal team and crisis communications people involved. It turns out the Director General wasn't briefed until Thursday last week, if we believe that. So yeah, really, you've got to look at the escalation process, and also the media trainers are going to earn their money today because this is going to be an absolute car crash of a press conference.
Mm-hmm. Andy, what would your professional advice be to the presenter? Because there could be an argument that says, if you've got nothing to hide, come out with this and say, look, this is me they're referring to, but let the police investigation happen. I can't say anything till after that, because they would be in control of the situation, you could argue. I mean, I just cannot see how this name will remain a secret for much longer. What would your advice be?
Choice but to keep quiet whilst the legal and police investigation is going on. You know, obviously, when it does move to a slightly advanced stage, if it does, because obviously the main crux of the defence at the minute is this is a frivolous, false accusation. So they don't want to justify a rambling as they're sort of positioning it as. They want to try and keep quiet at the minute. I can fully understand that. But when more details come out, they are going to have to go into typical crisis comms mode, try and get ahead of the story, apologise where they can, and where it's not sort of making them legally vulnerable, and then try and, work out if they do have a defence and how they may be able to get back into the job market.
Andy Barr, it's very interesting listening to you, really. Thank you very much indeed. Andy's a crisis PR expert. Thank you.
Yeah, really interesting point he made about the Sun newspaper in all of this as well. Keith has just written in. Good morning to you, Keith, saying, in my view, the claim by the lawyer of the victim, the Sun is now going to have to produce all of their evidence. Failure to do so will destroy the paper's